Hello again. All right, we are back. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Thanks to the Petersburg Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event. This is our second campaign forum for the evening. We are joined today by our two candidates for the 17th Senate District, former delegate Joe Morrissey and independent Waylon Ross. So, 16th, excuse me, I'm sorry. So yes, the 16th Senate District. I will go over the rules one more time for our candidates, if you will bear with me. I printed out everything else, I did not print the rules. Here we go. There we go. All right. Each candidate will be allowed to provide a 2-minute opening statement. The same questions will be asked of all candidates in contested elections in the same district. Each candidate will be allowed 90 seconds to provide a response to each question. The moderator will pose questions in alternating order so that no one candidate always responds first or last. The moderator may ask a series of questions in a lightning round, which requires yes or no answers with no more than one sentence of explanation. Each candidate will be allowed to provide a 1-minute closing statement. By virtue of a coin toss, Waylon Ross will go first with his opening statement.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello. First, I would like to thank VPN for inviting me to participate in this forum. I would also like to thank the Petersburg Chamber of Commerce for co-sponsoring this forum. I would like to welcome those to my city, Petersburg, if you are out of town. And I would like to welcome those, including my former boss, to the 16th District. This is my first time running for a state senate. I'm 29 years old. Why am I running? Because Petersburg faces unique issues, and we need innovative solutions, and we need young people at the table. How can we get the young people at the table if they are intimidated? So one reason why I am running is to encourage my peers to get involved in the political process, to run for office, and to really just know what's going on. What we need to do as far as policy is empower our community economically. We face high crime rates in the city and low income, and none of our solutions are going to get better until we empower the residents of Petersburg in the 16th District. And we do that by encouraging self-employment, small business and micro entrepreneurship. I think the days are over where we should go beg big companies to come, set up shop in the city and give our residents a few temporary jobs. What we need to do is catch high school students, make sure they are trained with vocational and technical skills, and encourage them to start their own businesses and take their skills straight to the market instead of begging somebody to hire them, especially when they're faced with obstructions like maybe being an ex-felon because of our unfair judicial system. So that's why I'm here running today. I would need everybody's help to really come to the table. I can't do it by myself. I don't know the solutions, every solution that we should implement to solve our problems, but that's why I'm here to try to figure out what the people of Petersburg and our surrounding communities want and need to do to thrive. I'm here to help. This may be my first election I'm running in, but it won't be my last. So I'm going to stick around and be holding up the end card. Thank you for having me. It's good to see so many familiar faces in the world.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Craig. First of all, I want to thank the Petersburg Chamber of Commerce and Virginia Public Media for hosting this. There's a smattering of elected officials out there. I thank you for coming out. I acknowledge my wife in the front row and her mother, my mother-in-law, and most importantly, the folks that are going to be voting in this upcoming election. Thank you for coming out. I'd like you at the end of this hour to have a real clear idea of what I'm going to do. if you give me the privilege of representing you in the Virginia State Senate. First of all, my first course of action to introduce bills dealing with criminal justice reform. I want to double the number of drug courts in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That is a clear no-brainer. I want to establish a third court in Virginia. Right now we have a criminal court, we have a drug court, we need a mental health court. Somebody that commits an unlawful act while under the throes of a mental health crisis hasn't committed a crime. He or she deserves a bed, but not a jail bed. We need to be in Virginia, we need to establish a clean energy standard that is the envy of the other 49 states in our Commonwealth. Let me be clear, we are moving decidedly and markedly and very swiftly changing the way we produce energy and distribute energy in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There is no question we are moving from fossil fuels to renewables. I want to see solar panels on the top of every school in the Commonwealth of Virginia, every municipal building. I want our school buses to be fueled with biofuel. I want wind energy and wind farms, be they in the Atlantic Ocean or the Blue Ridge Mountain, powering hundreds of thousands of homes in the Commonwealth. We need to set the example. A clean energy standard will be established in Virginia, and rest assured, your children will be working in clean energy. The environment is very important to me. One of the bills that I took the greatest pride in getting passed when I was in the House of Delegates, where I served for almost 9 years, was preventing the point source introduction of nitrogen into the James River. We need to keep phosphorus and nitrogen out of our iconic James and Appomattox and Chesapeake Bay. I'm going to introduce legislation to do that. I don't want to cap coal ash ponds. I want them excavated. I want it paid for by Dominion. I want it recycled. And I don't want even the possibility of it leaching into our rivers. Mental health services need to be improved in Virginia. We have to focus on those children that have committed suicide and why they did it. Because the mental health services simply aren't available. The opioid crisis is crucial, and I want to focus on that too. Thank you for coming out tonight, and I look forward to addressing Craig these and many other issues. And Waylon, thank you for holding yourself out for elective offices too.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. The first question will go first to you. Republicans have held a majority in the House of Delegates for the past 20 years, and this year Democrats have an opportunity to reverse that trend. What difference will it make if the control of the House does or does not change hands?
There are certain issues that I think Democrats have held closer and near and dear to their hearts. One of those is gun control. I'm in favor of common sense gun control measures. There was absolutely no reason to have an AR-15 or an AK-47 and be able to walk down the middle of Washington Street in Petersburg like you can do right now in front of the Appomattox School with an AK-47. We need to eliminate those assault rifles, and I mean eliminate them. The Democrats, I believe, are more geared towards gun control measures. There are other issues involving school construction, renovation, repair, that I think Democrats and Republicans can work on together. When it comes to the environment, when I was in the House, I saw efforts on both sides of the aisle to have our rivers and tributaries pristine. I think that both parties can work on that. But when it comes to mental health issues, creating a mental health court, reestablishing parole in the Commonwealth of Virginia, all things that are important to me, those are reasons that I think I'd like to see the Democrats take control. But let me be very clear. If they're not, I'm going to work across the aisle to both sides. And hopefully later on in this debate, I can mention this forum, I can mention some Republicans who have introduced legislation that I intend to work with.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
Well, I think our two-party system is too deadlocked to produce any meaningful change right now. A lot of people ask me why am I running as an independent, which is I am proud to run as an independent. But I did not decide to run in this race until 2 or 3 weeks before my signature was due on June 11th. Of course, the primaries was already underway. So I didn't know I was going to actually succeed in getting enough signatures. I had to get almost 500. You had to have 250, but our our registrar would tell you you should get double the amount so that you can make sure you qualify, because they will likely throw something out. But I think because our two-party system is too deadlocked right now, I am calling for a third party, the Real Justice Party. The Real Justice Party is a historic party from Petersburg, Virginia. It was birthed out of Petersburg, Virginia, and it was an alliance between the Confederates. It was right after the Civil War, 10 years after the Civil War. It was an alliance between the Confederates and free black people, both newly freed and long-time free black people that were here in Petersburg, Virginia, Pocahontas Island. So I think that with increased competition, we can actually see some things get done in the General Assembly. That's why I'm calling for a third party, a Real Justice Party, which will take both members and ideologies and policy priorities from both sides. We bring them together, and we can actually implement meaningful change. But to do that, we have to step away from, you know, this battleground right now between the Republicans and the Democrats. They're at a stalemate right now. They can't pass anything they want to pass on either side, and I'm talking about both on the federal level and the state level. So what we really need to do is find innovative solutions, independent solutions, and like I said, I'm calling for the gathering of the Real Justice Party.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. The next question will go first to you. What do you believe are the biggest problems facing this district regionally that can be addressed at the state level?
Well, I'm going to specifically focus on Petersburg, but I think that these issues also extend to other communities in our surrounding districts and even in South Richmond. But I think crime, of course, is one of the largest problems here. Economic disparities in our low-income populations and our lack of leadership. I have been very vocal about calling for at-large seats on our Petersburg City Council. That is because I think that could incentivize more people in the city to become involved in politics and even run for office. So I think that if we tackle the solutions like economic empowerment of our city and better leadership and a better sense of community, I think that you will see Petersburg rise very quickly and return to its former glory.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
2 minutes, 90 seconds. I would say the health care, particularly for our aging population in Petersburg, economic development, and eradication of blighted homes. We introduced legislation when I was in the General Assembly in 2012 to eliminate blighted homes, where the municipality takes receivership of that house or that blighted facility. It hasn't been taken advantage of like it should. I want to focus on that, and I have some expertise in it. Economic development. Petersburg in particular has hemorrhaged more businesses in the last 5 years than all of our other jurisdictions combined. Indeed, Hopewell, Richmond, Chesterfield County, Colonial Heights, they have added businesses. There are some things that we can do. The Department of Housing and Community Development has grants that will allow communities to bring businesses in. One of those is the Vibrant Community Initiative. It allows a municipality to receive money and to create and attract businesses. We need a strategic business plan between our tertiary universities, particularly Virginia State University, and those businesses that want to develop medical, or research and development businesses. There has to be that partnership. We also need to marry businesses coming in with the development of our housing stock. In Petersburg, there's a real disparity between some areas of the community where the housing stock is excellent and some where it is deplorable. We need to incentivize businesses to come in. We can do it through either credits like a machine and tool tax credit, or a credit for meals tax or sales tax. And also, probably the biggest avenue that we can use is the 2017 Jobs Act and tax cut, which allowed almost $100 billion to go into opportunity zones throughout the United States. And there are several here in Petersburg. We haven't taken advantage of them. We need to.
Mr. Morrissey, since you mentioned blighted properties, we did have a question on that. if you could elaborate, what more can the state do to allow localities to deal with blighted properties?
Right. First thing, in 2012, House Bill 491, it allowed a municipality to take control of a blighted home. And we know what a blighted home is. It's where the tree is growing through from the living room, through the second floor, and through the attic. It is burnt in many places. The windows are broken. It is a public nuisance. The police responding regularly, and it is a disgraceful situation, and it hurts the value of every other house on the street. The municipality, with this legislation, can take receivership or ownership of that house. And after they take ownership of it, they either can renovate it themselves or they can auction it off. We haven't taken advantage of it enough. Here's another one. In municipalities across the country, they have taken blighted homes and they have sold them for $1 to a developer. They've given them that home, and they've also given them the water hookup for it. And they've said this: post a bond, a $30,000 bond. You have to raise that home within 6 months. You have to begin new construction within 12 months after that. But what they're getting is the home, and they're getting the water hookup worth about $30,000. We should be able to almost eliminate 214 of those blighted homes in Petersburg, and we should be able to do it in slight order. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is when I talk about that as well.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ross, your strategy for dealing with blighted properties.
Blighted property. Well, I think that what the city should do regarding first of all, before I say what they should do regarding blighted properties, I think that we should point out the blight doesn't only come from residential owners vacating their property. It comes from businesses coming into the city, buying up or building these big factories, and then when their tax incentive run out, they go expand out of town. Well, what do they do with the buildings that they leave behind? It's not only our houses that an eyesore. You know, it's Mr. Morrison put up a couple billboards on the primary of the old hotel, old model. But that was a business. That wasn't a residential owner. So I think that we have to realize that when we incentivize businesses to come in temporarily for our citizens and give temporary jobs, they will leave at a point. And when they will leave behind capital, you know, and that capital will turn into blight if nobody's there to take care of that property. But as regarding the blighted property that we have now, I think that many people in the city would be uncomfortable with the city taking over our property. But what I would suggest they do is, first of all, try to contact the owners, and if they can't, then they should auction off the property. Give the owners time, a chance for a time to change it. But if they auction off the property, I think that they should take the money and provide some of the proceeds to the owners. I just don't think that you should take their property and say, hey, you should have cut your grass. Sorry, you out $100,000. So if they auction off the property and say they get $60,000, maybe the city should keep administration fee, and then they should give some of the proceeds to the previous owners.
Sticking with you, Mr. Ross, we've seen a recent expansion in gambling in the Commonwealth. New betting machines and sports betting companies and casinos are pushing for legalizing more gaming in the Commonwealth. Is that something you would support?
Yes. I don't necessarily think that the state government should have a monopoly over gambling activities. I would support different independent gambling activities. To me, that is entrepreneurship. We just have to make sure, of course, that we empower our residents to have the money for their bills and their responsibilities and whatnot. And if they choose gambling as an outlet, well, we all need our outlet, so I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. And I don't necessarily think that the state government is better adept to provide gambling services to, you know, the citizens of the state. So I would support it.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Craig. First of all, I do support the extension of the gaming industry in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I want to clarify and distinguish myself from Mr. Ross. I don't believe that government should ever be involved in the private sector business. They should absolutely not be involved in the gaming industry other than to regulate it. let's start with the horse industry. The horse industry in Virginia brings in millions and millions of dollars to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank God that New Kent has reopened the racetrack out in New Kent County. It has generated hundreds and hundreds of jobs. Rosie's Emporium has created 800 jobs. They just finished a remarkable 15-day cycle at Colonial Downs, and it has been magnificent. And let's be clear, as far as the gaming industry goes, there are at least 5 entities right now that are thinking of developing casinos in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Do we need 5? Absolutely not. It would be counterproductive. And let's also realize too, that folks are going to gamble. They're going to go to our sister states in West Virginia, the District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So we do need a gambling, I am in favor of a casino in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Perhaps 2, maybe 1 in Bristol, 1 in the eastern part of this state. It's a jobs creator, and if regulated properly, just like the lottery 30 years ago, it can produce magnificent dividends for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
First to Mr. Morrissey, do you support ending cash bail statewide, and do you support mandatory minimum sentences?
Absolutely support the ending of cash bail in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've just seen the Commonwealth Attorney's elections in Fairfax County, Chesterfield County, Arlington County, where the prosecutors now are in favor of eliminating cash bond. Let me tell you what happens with cash bond. Two different defendants, exact identical charge, possession of a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance. Bond is set at $2,500 for both defendants. One defendant has the resources to get out on bond, the other doesn't. So that person stays in jail. That's intrinsically wrong. So I absolutely support the elimination of cash bond, and that's where we're moving as a Commonwealth. As far as mandatory minimum sentence, I've spoken on this issue so many times. I gave a white paper presentation in Ireland many years ago. I call it the Kimber-Smith Law. I will introduce legislation in my first week in the General Assembly to eliminate mandatory minimum sentences, which takes the discretion away from the judiciary. That's wrong.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ross.
Well, I guess if I can add a city to your list of places of possible casinos, I would add Petersburg. You need to build up our economy around here, not Bristol, not Eastern Virginia. We need a strong advocate for Petersburg, Virginia, and that has been my point from the very start. Regarding cash bonds, I don't really have an opinion one way or another right now, because I need to do a little bit more research on the effects of our bond system. But regarding mandatory minimums, yes, I will support ending mandatory minimums.
We've recently expanded Medicaid here in the Commonwealth. What can be done at the state level to lower the cost of health care?
Well, in grad school, I received my Master's of Public Policy, and I concentrated in economics, and I went on to teach micro and macroeconomics at Northern Virginia Community College. And one the founding principles that stuck with me is competition. So I would support a public option, healthcare option for the citizens of Virginia. I think that that's one way that we can drive down the cost of healthcare by introducing formidable competitor to our current healthcare agencies, insurance agencies.
Mr. Morrissey.
Expanding Medicaid to almost 390,000 Virginians has been a boon to both the healthcare recipients and the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that was a great first start. More people that heretofore had not had access to critical health care or specialists are now covered. Ask the hospital administrators, doctors groups, nurses groups, they will tell you it has been a net positive. More people are insured, the risk pool has increased, and costs have come down. That's a fact. I do support a public option in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I do not support Medicaid for all. That is simply another form of socialized medicine. It hasn't worked in Europe and Australia, 2 different continents that I lived on. I don't support that. I do support a state option to buy into Medicaid. But I also support a concept that is growing around the country, and that's called telehealth, where a specialist or a primary care physician provides medical coverage to an individual who is a great distance away, but they can talk to each other on the internet. And the other thing, let me be clear, in our rural jurisdictions, the single strongest reason that some of those rural hospitals have not closed down is because we have expanded Medicaid to 400,000 Virginians, including 200,000 children. I'm all in.
Mr. Morrissey, how would you had mentioned opportunity zones a moment ago. How would you have, had you been in the legislature, how would you have allowed localities to weigh in on the selection of opportunity zones?
Well, the opportunity zones were created by federal legislation 2 years ago, and what it did is it put almost 100 billion, that's a B, into our economy throughout the United States. There are over 1,000 opportunity zones, and that is controlled in a great deal by Congress. But we have opportunity zones right here in Hopewell. I had the great privilege about 2 weeks ago of meeting with almost 90 developers here in Petersburg. And when I say developers, I'm not talking about large-scale developers, but they were mom-and-pop organizations, and I use that expression reverently and respectfully, that want to buy homes, renovate them, either put them into the affordable housing inventory or flip them. And the opportunity zones are allowing people to do that because of the tax credits. And the tax credit deals with capital gains. So somebody will put money in to a dilapidated building if they can get a federal tax credit, a state tax credit, an opportunity zone tax credit, or an enterprise zone tax credit. In Richmond, they have changed the landscape in downtown Richmond and Scott's Addition and Manchester because of these federal tax credits. Once again, I'll say that I am all in, and I will do everything I can to highlight for the citizens in Petersburg what you can do with opportunity zones, but also lead by example.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The person in our audience asked, and Mr. Morrissey spoke to this a bit, how localities, I guess if you were in the legislature, how you would have been able to influence the selection of these opportunity zones. Many of them, I believe, now have been selected. Working within the existing landscape, how would you take advantage of this program?
Well, of course, we have to look at the areas that are low income, right? And we have to look at the communities that face the most economic problems when compared to other areas in the state. But more than deciding which areas will be opportunity zones, we have to realize that in these areas, you would have citizens that don't particularly pay attention to what's going on politically. Even if our lawmakers are trying to present a solution to their problems, so I think that more effort should be put into PR. More effort should be put into advertising the monies available for the community and reaching the people who actually qualify to receive the money. Because if not, you would just have the good old boys who's used to sticking around at the Capitol and the General Assembly and already have friends, and they would get the money. But what we need is the money to go to, the people who actually need it, and that might not be, the people who are familiar with the policies when they hot off the press or right out of the General Assembly. So I think that a good PR advertising strategy would go a long way, as opposed to just which opportunity zone, we have to compare those, we have to join those efforts.
The next question goes to you first. Home prices and rents have been going up across the state and the country. What role should state lawmakers play in fixing the problem?
Well, they definitely should focus on keeping affordable housing affordable and making sure that our most vulnerable population have a place to lay their head at night. The problem, and they spoke to this during the House of Delegates forum earlier, the problem with affordable housing is usually they try to build projects and really just pack everybody who may be from a low-income family into these projects. And where you have a concentration of poverty, you will have a concentration of crime. So for many reasons, I think that our strategy should switch from projects to incentivizing developers to build affordable housing that is really spread out throughout the community, so that maybe one low-income family will live amongst 10, middle-class families, and that will incentivize them to keep their, yards cleaned and their house painted and all of that good stuff. And not only developers, but single-family homeowners. We should incentivize them to build or to keep their property affordable by maybe incentivizing them by giving them some tax dollars to subsidize their cost of keeping their house affordable.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Morrissey.
Greg, let me first say there's a lot of libertarian blood coursing through my veins. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I don't think government should be involved in an endeavor that the private sector can handle better and more responsibly. But this is one area that government ought to be involved in. I had the privilege of serving on the board of Neighborhood Housing Services in Richmond, which provided a pathway for first-time home buyers to buy a home. I support that. I want to see government doing more of that, providing financial literacy for that first-time home buyer. I want to see in Petersburg us move from a 40% are owners, 60% are renters, reverse that. And we need to do it with services that are provided with entities like Neighborhood Housing Services of Richmond, which is a HUD-affiliated home. Let's provide literacy training. Let's also allow those individuals who want to buy a home to understand that being a homeowner often means you pay less for your housing. Right now, with interest rates down at 3% and 4%, you can buy a home, get a mortgage, and then pay less than when you would for market rate for that house. That's what I want to see happening. I have already started working with individuals, both those people involved in market, workforce housing, and other NGOs who want to help provide affordable housing here in Petersburg. I'm going to continue to do that. It is the single most important thing to turn Petersburg around, having more people as homeowners. And I'm going to be a cheerleader for it. I'm going to be in the forefront.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ross.
Oh, yeah, I believe that one.
You've already answered. No, I'm losing track. Sorry.
I can come up with some more.
That's all right. We'll get back. You'll have a chance to answer another question very soon. Mr. Morrissey, right now in the Commonwealth, this is an audience question, you must go to the locality in which you were charged with a felony to ask for an expungement. If elected, do you support, I believe they're asking about automatic expungement of nonviolent felonies? If so, how many years would you propose for this to take effect?
That's a great question. Right now, we don't have expungement in Virginia unless you have been acquitted of a crime or the charges have been non-prossed by the Commonwealth. I favor expungement. I introduced legislation in 2012 that said if you have a felony conviction and you go 12 years and you've been a pillar of the community, no other brushes with the law, that charge will be expunged. Misdemeanor would be 8 years. I remember arguing that before a House of Delegates subcommittee, and there were 4 Democrats up there are 3 Republicans on there, and I quickly realized that this just might get through this committee. I quickly ended my comments, hoping that we take a vote, and you could see the Republicans up there pressing buttons, and all of a sudden 3 more Republicans came in and killed that legislation. That's a reason, another reason that I'd like to see Democrats take control of the House, is important to provide expungement in Virginia for somebody who is desirous of leading a straight and narrow life, somebody who has shown that they have rehabilitated themselves. They've started a business, they've started a family. You want to incentivize people not to become recidivists? Give them hope, give them expungement. Virginia is only one of 10 states that doesn't provide expungement in the United States. Let's end that.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Russ.
I really do not understand why we need every single occurrence of an arrest or a charge that does not lead to a conviction or a plea deal, I would be in favor of automatically expunging all records that are not convictions, really, because why would we need to consider that if somebody was arrested but found not guilty? It hurts them on different applications, job applications. They don't only ask you, you know, were you ever found guilty. They ask you were you arrested. So that's why we need to ban the box and auto expunge all criminal record that is not a conviction, that is not something that says you were wrong and you were caught being wrong.
Thank you. Virginia is a right-to-work state where workers can't be forced to join a union when they accept a job. Recently, some Democrats have proposed ending Virginia's right-to-work status. Do you support this or other changes, or would you keep the law the way it is?
I'm going to make this real simple and real brief.
I think that's all right. Yeah.
I support right to work. I like that Virginia is a right to work state. I don't think that our employees should be forced to join a union that they might not agree with. So yes, I support right to work, and I would like Virginia to remain a right to work state, mainly because I encourage micro entrepreneurship and small businesses. So I understand that you might need to be very flexible and innovative with your hiring practices, especially if you only bring in on 1 or 2 extra people in addition to yourself. So I would like Virginia to stay a right to work state.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Morrissey.
Craig, I support the existing right to work legislation in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There was a reason that Virginia was named the #1 state to do business in the Commonwealth for almost 5 years in a row, and that's because we are attracting businesses to the Commonwealth because of our right to work legislation, and I'm going to continue to support that.
Short and sweet. All right. Would you support state-financed schools construction in Virginia?
Yes, I would. One of the things I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks that I intend to reach across the aisle to the other side. One of the bills that I saw in the 2019 General Assembly session was Senate Bill 1330 that was introduced by Senator Bill Stanley, which created a $3 billion referendum which would serve to provide for construction, renovation, and repair of all of our crumbling schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It got out of Finance Committee but didn't get out of the State Senate. I'm going to be working on my side of the aisle to support that Republican-initiated bill to fix our schools. And let me just say this. I thought former Governor Belial said it best. He's in the last days of his life right now, and in an interview recently he said, during his term, he found that investing now was the best thing to ensure dividends in the long run. I want to invest in the schools now, not kick the can down the road, and we will get the benefits of superb brick-and-mortar schools in the Commonwealth.
Mr. Ross.
Yes, I would support state-funded construction of school property, but we would need additional resources to accompany that funding for the construction, because it would be no real purpose for Petersburg High School to get state money to build a new gym, and they don't have enough money to keep the lights on in that gym, or enough money to pay the janitors to keep it clean. And what I would suspect happened if Petersburg or other localities were given state money for construction, but not money to actually maintain these buildings, we would see more blight.
Got an interesting question from the audience. And actually there are two, and I'm going to kind of put them together. If a policeman has killed a citizen in one municipality, should his record be known, or be made known to the public if he transfers to a new municipality? And also, in that vein, would you support releasing an officer in this type of situation's name to the media?
Well, the second part of your question, would I support releasing the officer's name to the media? Maybe not immediately, maybe not until after an investigation has went underway and we can ensure that nothing will happen by releasing his name that will deter the investigation or obstruct the investigation. The first part of your question, can you repeat the first part?
Sure, the first part. Bear with me.
The first part was if if an officer has killed a citizen in one municipality, should his record be known to the public if he transfers to a new municipality?
I've called for community advisory boards to kind of look over complaints of the police and our local elected officials. I think that if that were implemented and we actually have some type of ruling or some type of conclusion from the city or the community as to if the officer was justified or not in the killing, then yes, if the officer was justified in the killing, then I think that we should protect the officer by keeping his name and his police record, so to speak, internal to the police departments.
Mr. Morrison.
I have a policy that sunshine is the best disinfectant. I think that things should be transparent at all times in the government. Whenever you start even contemplating not releasing records or sequestering them, then we're running into trouble. So number one, the first question was if a police officer kills another individual and he transfers to another jurisdiction, that assumes arguendo that he has been acquitted. Certainly, his record should be, the record of that incident should be public knowledge. I'm not talking about branding that person or some type of scarlet letter, but let the public know what took place. Second, you want to know if the person's name should be released to the media. Absolutely. Any other individual who is accused of a crime, their name is released. Why would we think of hiding that from the general public, irrespective of whether or not that person was acquitted or not? The other thing that you didn't ask, but I thought that question was going in this direction, if a police officer kills an individual in one jurisdiction, be it a city or a county, the investigation of that officer ought not to be by the police in that jurisdiction, but a contiguous jurisdiction or another in another part of the state.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey, I think I know your thoughts on this, but I'll ask the question anyway. Should localities be given the ability to modify or take down Confederate monuments?
I believe the short answer is yes. The little longer answer is this. I subscribe to the adage that those closest to the govern best. Washington ought not to be telling Richmond, the capital, what to do, and Richmond ought not to be telling the localities what to do as a general policy. Accordingly, if the locality, be it the county or the city, municipality, decides that there should be some tweaking with that with monuments coming down, they should be the body that decides.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
I really want to request extra time on this question, but I would say yes, I do think that the localities should have a say in what is presented in their community, and if they think that it's causing an issue in their community, I think that they should be able to do something about it. But I will also say that I am not in support of taking down Confederate monuments or changing the names of streets or schools from Confederate leaders. Why? It goes back to the Real Justice Party. The Real Justice Party from Petersburg was an alliance between Confederate leaders and black people. And we saw in Petersburg massive strides in our economy. We saw the building of Peabody, the first black public school in Virginia, right here in Petersburg. We saw the building and the funding of Virginia State University in Petersburg, which was the first black college in state-funded college in Virginia. And we saw Central State, which we talked about earlier, was the first black asylum, all in Petersburg. All of these institutions came to Petersburg within 1 or 2 decades, and that was a result of the Real Justice Party, which again was an alliance between the Confederate leaders and black people. I think that we need to properly educate the community on not only just the fighting that occurred, but also the alliances that happen, particularly in this community. So I'm not for taking down or erasing the Confederate history, but I do think that the localities should have a say in, what is viewed in that city, especially as a statue or something that you would encourage the community to celebrate.
Thank you, sir. Last year, the General Assembly approved a constitutional amendment to establish a redistricting commission. Do you think the measure is sufficient, or would you like to see something more or different in terms of independent or nonpartisan redistricting?
I can't say if that measure was sufficient or not because I'm not particularly familiar with what the General Assembly did last year, but I will say that I am in favor of independent redistricting. I do not think, and it's absolutely crazy to me to think, that lawmakers can choose their voters instead of voters choosing their lawmakers. So yes, I would favor independent redistricting committee. Of course, Petersburg was really one of the localities that was hurt the most from gerrymandering. The Supreme Court a few years ago ordered us into a new congressional district, and they basically ruled that we had been gerrymandered. So I would support independent redistricting commission, and I think that they should. I think that they should be appointed by lawmakers, and they should not only be citizens, but in different areas of public trust. But they should not be lawmakers. I do not think that the lawmakers should be able to pick their lines and who their voters will be.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Craig, the single most important piece of legislation that was passed last year in 2019 was the Redistricting Commission. It's a 16-person commission that is responsible for redrawing all of the 100 delegate districts, House of Delegate districts, and the Senate districts. It is a 2-year process. Because it's an amendment to our state constitution, it has to be passed twice in 2 consecutive legislatures with an intervening vote. Jill Vogel, Republican, has been a leader, as you know, in redistricting, nonpartisan redistricting, and I will support Jill's legislation. If we get into the General Assembly next year and the Democrats take control of the House and the Senate, if there is one iota of a suggestion that they're going to retract from that redistricting commission, now that they have the power, I will fight against it with every fiber of my being. The best thing that we can do is create districts that are competitive, have a smattering, are compact, contiguous, and I will support that redistricting. I'll share this one quick story because I see that I have some time. When I went into the General Assembly in 2007, I represented Hopewell in the House of Delegates. But do you know I didn't represent a single resident in Hopewell? Now, my district went from Henrico to Richmond, and in order to include Hopewell, they drew a line along the coastline of Prince George County. So I represented Prince George, but they did that, they drew that so that I could bring the enclave of Hopewell. That's wrong. Our state constitution says 2 things. Make that district compact, make it contiguous. And I don't care what they do in 2021. Whatever my district becomes, should I be fortunate enough to be elected to the state senate, I will always pursue non-partisan redistricting that are compact and contiguous. It's the best thing that happened last year.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey, we asked this in the last forum. Should the General Assembly hold hearings into the allegations of sexual assault against Justin Fairfax?
It's never been done before, but let me just say this. I thought that the treatment of Lieutenant Governor Fairfax was disgraceful. There were 2 allegations, and I mean allegations. And for that, the House Democratic Caucus, the State Democratic Caucus, the titular leaders in Virginia, the Democratic Party said, "You're out," because of the allegation. Thereafter, numerous holes began to be developed. I believe in due process. Justin Fairfax was entitled to due process. He weathered the storm, and that is a good thing. With regard to whether or not there should be a hearing in the General Assembly, if it's going to be there, I'm going to be front and center, but I don't think it's the correct forum to do that. I think the correct form is a judicial body. Justin Fairfax has called for a police investigation in both Durham and Boston. The accusers, inexplicably, have not raised that complaint with the law enforcement, but they have gone on national television. I don't think the appropriate forum is the well of the House of Delegates to conduct a circus-type atmosphere. But if it's done, I'll be there front and center to make sure that Justin Fairfax gets his due process.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
I do not have a specific comment on Justin Fairfax specifically, but I will say if the General Assembly starts the precedent of holding hearings for sexual misconduct, they should do it for all the members who was accused of sexual misconduct.
Thank you. We've had multiple questions on reducing violence in the district. What are the best strategies for violence reduction here in the Commonwealth?
Well, I think that if we want to reduce crime and violent crimes, then it goes back to money. The citizens need money. They don't want to be criminals. They don't want to be violent. I was born and raised in Petersburg. I love Petersburg, and I love my family and my peers from Petersburg. And week after week, we see news stories of shootings and killings. And it might seem really stressful to read in the news, but could you imagine going to school and graduating, with these victims and hearing week after week that another friend has passed away or shot and killed? Is devastating. I think that if we're not going to really approach how we can empower the citizens of Petersburg and other low-income areas or areas that really suffers from violent crime, then anything else, would just be a waste of time. The effort would be a waste of time. So we have to go back to encouraging our community to start businesses and empowering themselves economically, and then I think that we would see a decrease in criminal activity if we see an increase in the class from low class to middle class.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
I'm going to suggest two things that I think would be productive and purposeful in reducing crime. One is regional cooperation among the law enforcement authorities. We have found that when the regions cooperate, Henrico, Hanover, Richmond, Tri-Cities, and whether it be the Metropolitan Airport Authority, the multi-jurisdictional grand jury, RMA, you get a better system. I would like to see regional cooperation among the law enforcement authorities themselves. Number two, the other thing that we have got to do, and this is one thing where my opponent and I respectfully disagree, we have to eliminate these assault rifles. I said publicly throughout the primary campaign and into this election that we need to eliminate the AR-15, the AK-47. It is a gun, a weapon of war. It's not used to shoot a deer, a squirrel, or to protect somebody in their home. It is an atrocious weapon that is used to create unbelievable carnage. My opponent, and he's entitled to his opinion, but on August 23rd on Channel 6 said that he does not believe in the elimination of the AK-47. That's where we disagree. I want to eliminate it.
Since you cannot, you know what? I'm going to make the next. We had a gun question, so I'm going to ask a gun question. I'll start with you. Right? I'm losing track. No, I believe the next question goes. It goes first to Mr. Morrissey. So, yes, Mr. Morrissey, should Virginia change any of its gun laws? You've already spoken about assault rifles. I'm going to give that a second.
Sure.
Sounds like Petersburg.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're right next to the station, I believe. Thank you. Should Virginia change any of its gun laws, and should cities and counties have more control over regulating firearms?
Short answer, yes and yes. I respect the Second Amendment. I have taught the Second Amendment, but I know this. No amendment to our Constitution, our United States Constitution, is an unfettered right. whether it is involving the right to free speech. It's not an unfettered right. I can't defame you, Craig. I can't yell fire in a closed theater. So, the Fourth Amendment right to be free from an unreasonable search and seizure is not an unfettered right. There are conditions and restrictions. With regard to guns, again, I favor the elimination of assault-type weapons, magazines that can hold 100 to 150 rounds, bump stocks, suppressors, also known as silencers. I'm in favor of universal background checks. I'm in favor of red flag laws that allow the judiciary, pursuant to due process and a hearing, remove a gun from somebody who may possess a gun and be in the midst of a mental health crisis. Also, I'm in favor of reinstituting the one handgun purchase a month. I mean, let's be clear. If that was Governor Wilder's chief achievement during his tenure as governor, and you can buy 12 guns a year. Over 10 years, you could have purchased 120 guns. I think that law, I would like to see that law reinstated.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Ross.
Yeah, when I gave my CBS interview, I did say that I was not particularly in favor of an assault weapons ban. But yes, I do think that Virginia needs to change their gun laws. I think that they need to strengthen gun rights. The Second Amendment right is a right of every citizen, and I do understand that no right is unfettered, but I need to speak to Petersburg issues. And even though, as I stated earlier, we get news stories week after week about another shooting and killing in Petersburg, they're not mass shootings, or they're not with assault rifles necessarily. They are crimes that are going unsolved. So the reason why they're going unsolved is because the people committing those crimes are usually ex-felons that don't have the right to bear arms. And that causes a problem because they still have to protect themselves in the community. So what will they do? They will get guns off the black market, and they will still shoot them, and they will still protect themselves, and we will still see killings. So I think that if we strengthen gun rights, then we can actually see increase in the number of murders that we solve in the city. And how do we increase gun rights? Well, we need to give automatic restoration of gun rights to ex-felons. Now that we streamline our civil rights restoration, we need to streamline gun rights restoration also.
Thank you. The next question goes first to you. Do you support an increase in the minimum wage? If so, how much and how should it be implemented?
I support tying the minimum wage to the inflation rate, last year's inflation rate. So the average inflation rate over 30 years is about 3%. So we would have to figure out what's our principal, and then every single year we can look at the last year's inflation to gauge what the minimum wage rate, what the minimum wage would be for the following year, and that regulation will be implemented for new hires. And for current hires, of course, you don't drop their pay, but sometimes the inflation rate can increase, sometimes the inflation can go down, depending on the year. So I think that we should tie it to the inflation rate, and then we'll see sometimes our employers will have to pay a little bit more for their workers because the cost of living went up. Then we will see sometimes that they will pay less for their new hires because the cost of living has gone down in that particular area.
Mr. Morrissey.
I absolutely support increasing the minimum wage of the country and in the Commonwealth to $15 an hour. This country established the largest middle class of any developed country in the world because we started the minimum wage. It started in 1938 under FDR. It was 25 cents an hour. There's been 27 increases over the last 81 years. The last minimum wage increase was 10 years ago in 2009. I don't know one individual who can survive on $300 a week. Providing home for your child or children, clothing, transportation, public or otherwise, you can't do that. Kudos to the University of Virginia who, on their own volition, increased the minimum wage for their employees to $15 an hour. This is the third time I've said it tonight, but I will be all over that issue as far as supporting a minimum wage increase in the Commonwealth.
Thank you. There's a lot of controversy regarding women's reproductive health and preservation of life. What is your position on regulation in this area?
Well, to be very clear, I am not I don't personally believe in abortion. I believe in the sanctity of life, both at the beginning of life and at the end. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, I get a lot of libertarian blood flowing through me, and I don't believe government should be telling women what to do with their bodies, what not to do with their bodies. There was a bill, Greg, you covered it, in the General Assembly last year that allowed a late third trimester bill that would have allowed it's a bill that allowed a late third trimester abortion up until the time of the woman dilating. I thought that was disgraceful, and I said it. I was one of the only Democrats that came out and saying allowing an abortion in the third trimester that late makes no sense at all. So, let me be clear. I am personally opposed to abortion, but I don't believe government should be telling women what to do. A third trimester abortion should, a particularly late one, should be prohibited. And I also agree with Judge Hudson's recent decisions in federal court regarding this particular issue. And ma'am, one final thing, because I think I still have a couple of seconds. I've always found it ironic that in the legislature, you have Republicans that are all against abortion at the conception of life, but at the end of life, are all in favor of it taking somebody's life. And Democrats, just the opposite. They're in favor of abortion at the beginning, or taking the life at the beginning, conception of life, but at the end of it, they're against it. I'm consistent. I'm opposed to the death penalty, and I'm personally opposed to abortion. I don't think I can be any clearer than that.
Thank you, Ms. Morrissey. Mr. Ross.
I think I can be clear. It doesn't need a long and complicated answer. I'm pro-choice, and I'm pro-women's rights.
Thank you. Research, let's see, we've got just a couple minutes left, so I think I've got time for maybe one more question. Yeah, okay. All right, so, let's do workforce development since we're here in Petersburg. If elected, where would you focus your efforts on workforce development?
Did I take this one first?
I think this is for you. Yeah.
Well, I mentioned a few times my policy priority of economic empowerment by giving our citizens resources to start their own micro businesses and small businesses, and giving them resources to succeed and better compete with members of the Commonwealth and the United States. I don't think that I touched on vocational and technical training inside of our school system. I think we should expand programs for our high school students to maybe go outside of the building for apprenticeships and other type of vocational training. I think that the schools should sponsor tests, the state board test for our high school students, so they can pass and leave on with an actual skill that they can monetize. So I think that those would be my two main priorities for workforce development. I think self-employment, developing the workforce by having more employers instead of employees is one way, and then the second is increasing, expanding vocational and technical training inside of our classrooms and encouraging them to become business owners with their skill.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Craig. Waylon, you and I agree on the expanding apprenticeship programs in the Commonwealth. Companies like IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, or Local 10, pipe fitters and steam fitters, they need employees who are, as we say in Europe, are well-versed in the construction trades. There are jobs in Virginia right now, there are jobs in Petersburg, but these builders, they need a strong workforce of tradesmen. So that's the first thing. Let's expand the apprenticeship program using the model established by IBEW and Local 10. That's number one. Number two, we haven't talked about education this much in this forum, Craig, but one of the things that I would like to see to expand our teacher workforce, particularly in Petersburg, is the following. Teachers that are matriculating from Virginia State or other tertiary universities are coming to Petersburg. They get a job teaching. They are trained, they're mentored, they have the first year, and then what happens? They get plucked away by another neighboring jurisdiction. How about this? Let's give loan forgiveness to those teachers if they stay in a jurisdiction for 5 years. Let's give them low subprime loans if they buy a house in that jurisdiction. You get a teacher that stays 5 years, you will find the SOL scores increasing in that school. You will find businesses that will become attracted. Families will move in, because every family that is desirous of moving into Petersburg or Hopewell or Colonial Heights, the first thing they're asking their realtor is, tell me about the schools. We need all 6 schools in Petersburg to be not accredited, fully accredited. And we're going to start that with a workforce of teachers that have some skin in the game, that they're staying there. I mentioned earlier a strategic business plan, partnering a university with a business and focusing on research, medical, technological training, working together. Those are just 3 examples.
Thank you, sir. And that is our last question, so we now go to closing statements. The first statement goes to Mr. Ross.
Thank you so much for having me again. Thank you to Petersburg Chamber, and thank you to the Virginia Public Media Corporation. This is my first race, and it has really been interesting. It's really been a time, but I just want to thank all of you for showing up and even considering to vote for me, and I would encourage everybody just to get out to the polls. Early voting has begun, but election day is November 5th. Please encourage all of your family, friends, and peers from the city and the surrounding areas and in the 16th district to go out and vote. One of my main reasons for running in this election is to increase the number of voters at the polls this year. Historically, this is a low turnout year, year before the presidential election. So if we can show the world that Petersburg has only 3 or 4 extra thousand average voters, then we will be bringing a lot of political clout and political power to Petersburg. A lot more politicians and leaders from around the Commonwealth will talk about Petersburg, and that's the first step we need to take to restoring our really dignity in the city. So I love Petersburg. I'm here to run. I thank everybody for being involved in the political process. Please, if you have any sons, nephews, cousins, nieces, young people, get them out to the polls, tell them pay attention, play back this recording for them, because at the end of the day, we need as many people as possible to be involved in our political process. And it takes all of us to encourage others to become involved. So thank you for having me. Please get out to the polls and vote Waylon Ross for Senate in the 16th District.
Thank you, sir.
Greg,
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you very much, and thank VPM, the Chamber, for hosting this forum. Debates are good. Forums are good. You get to assess the different candidates. Waylon, thank you again for holding yourself out in this race. Larry Hackey, you're a challenger in this race. Thank you. It takes a lot to get involved in a race, to put yourself out in the public eye, and I appreciate everybody that does this. Here's what I want you to take away from this with me. I built my legacy in almost 9 years in the House of Delegates on constituent service. I'm going to do that as your state senator. I believe, like Tip O'Neill said, that all politics is local. And if it's something that's involving your water bills or your street, your crumbling schools, I want to know about it. I am going to be engaged. I am going to be engaged in Petersburg. Petersburg is approximately 19% of the voting electorate of the 16th Senate District. As you may or may not know, because I've knocked on many of your doors for 5 months, I campaigned 139 out of 141 days, and I spent 75% of my time in Petersburg. I have bought into it. I want you to leave here knowing that Joe will focus laser-like on criminal justice reform. Beginning with that simple bill that I'll introduce on my first day that will forever prohibit suspending somebody's license because of unpaid fines and costs. There's only a temporary measure. Give people hope by restoring parole in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Your Appomattox River, the James River, the iconic Chesapeake Bay, let's protect it. Let's prevent phosphorus and nitrogen from getting into that river. Let's make it pristine. And let's make sure that we make mental health services available in the community-based portion, not just the hospital setting, particularly for our young children, young people who are exposed to, that have committed or are contemplating suicide. I am going to be a cheerleader for this city, and I think I've demonstrated that over the last 5 or 6 months, and I'm going to continue to do that. Thank you for coming out tonight, and in case you're new to the area, my name is Joe Morrissey, and I'm running for the Virginia State Senate.
Thank you to both of our candidates, Joe Morrissey and Waylon Ross. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Thank you to the Petersburg Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event, and thank you to our audience at home. Have a great night.